Good afternoon, and welcome to this May meeting of the National Shipper Advisory Committee at the Federal Maritime Commission's hearing room in Washington, D.C. My name is Dylan Richmond, and I work for the FMC and serve as the committee's designated federal officer. The National Shipper Advisory Committee is a congressionally authorized federal advisory committee and is subject to Federal Advisory Committee Act requirements. The NSAC members have been meeting yesterday and this morning in their subcommittees. I'd like to recognize and thank NSAC member Morgan Jackson and her team at Walmart for their assistance with supporting yesterday's subcommittee meetings, and the staff here at the Commission supporting the logistics for today's meeting. Supporting me with the DFO duties are two alternate DFOs, Ellen Galantucci and Jeremy Lutz. Also of immense support have been Bill Cody, the Committee Management Officer and the Commission Secretary, his staff and the Office of the Secretary, and numerous offices here at the Commission. Before the committee begins their discussions, I would like briefly to go over their agenda for today and make a few announcements for committee members and attendees. Everyone should be aware that the meeting is being live streamed on the FMC's YouTube site and will be posted on the NSAC site afterwards. Two committee members are attending virtually, and members can see them on the screen to my left. Following introductions from the chair and vice chair, two of the subcommittees will be providing updates on their recent discussions. During each subcommittee discussion, they are planning to bring an item forward for the committee's consideration and a potential vote. Before any committee vote, there should be robust discussion on those items, and members must move a motion forward on that item and then a second in advance of the vote. I will then call on each member individually for their vote. These items have been made available to the public on the NSAC's webpage in advance of this meeting in accordance with the Federal Advisory Committee Act. If the committee approves these items, they will go to the Commission for their consideration, and the Commission will respond to the committee within 60 days as required by the statute. There will also be a few PowerPoint presentations during these discussions. These have already been made available on the NSAC's page as well. Following the subcommittee discussions, the committee will open the floor up to comment from the general public. Please note that minutes for this meeting will be taken and published in accordance with the Federal Advisory Committee Act. As I noted earlier, this meeting is also being live streamed on the FMC's YouTube page. For the committee members in the room, please use the tint cards to signal when you'd like to speak. For the members attending virtually, please use the raise hand function and we will call on you. If you are not speaking, please mute your microphones. When you do speak, please make sure to use the microphones and that they are turned on so that everyone in the room and online can hear you. Committee members are also reminded that antitrust laws do apply to the members in today's discussions. And finally, committee members are reminded that they cannot speak for the committee, the commission, or the federal government in their roles as members outside of the committee structure. They may speak to their personal observations as to their committee service and personal opinions on recommendations that the committee adopts. With that, Mr. Chair, I confirm that there is a quorum of committee members present, so the meeting may begin.
Thank you, Dylan. I first wanted to open up this meeting with a thanks for the members of the committee who could attend in person, those who could join us virtually, the FMC staff for their support in this meeting in DC, as well as the members of the public who are here. We hope to not only listen to what we're working on, but also have the option to provide public comment as we go forward. I want to recognize the commitment of the committee members to the ongoing work. This is a meeting that's following almost 6 weeks after our first public meeting for the year. There's a lot of work that's taken place in between the two meetings, and it really commends the ongoing commitment of each individual member in their focus and commitment to the work that we're trying to continue to move forward. Many people who could not join us today were still part of those deliberations. Some are joining virtually, and we had some members who are not here today in person who were here yesterday. So again, I really commend, as volunteers, the willingness to make time around professional and personal schedules to continue to move forward on the priorities that we've deemed important and want to move forward with the agency. I also appreciate, as Dylan noted, Morgan's efforts to help us have a well-structured day yesterday. We've had a lot of important meetings, both among ourselves, but with legislators and the staff and the commissioners at the FMC and the chairman. This is important, and it's important why we're here in DC relative to someplace else a couple times a year. The ability to engage directly cannot be underestimated. Technology is extremely helpful, but the time together working on these complex issues and trying to find the right recommendation forward within agency jurisdiction remains the focus. And lastly, again, we're continuing to try to widen our engagement with the public. And so for those who did attend today and who will continue to hopefully provide commentary to the agency, we appreciate your willingness to engage in this dialogue to ensure that we are hearing from the national shipper community, who we are a subset of in the work we continue. And I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everyone. So really, very short comment from me, but something I think it's important. So yesterday in our subcommittee meetings, today we met with a number of commissioners. I met with some of the commissioners separately. This work is hard and challenging and sometimes frustrating. But I think the input of all of us, when I think about the range of opinions we have, the fact that we don't agree on everything, the fact that we're teasing out some of the minutia of what liner shipping requires to be efficient, and to find those avenues of fluidity, it's a heavy lift, and it's not a quick lift. And I think for all of us and the companies, our companies which allow us to volunteer our time, there's not an instant gratification moment. There just isn't. And I think that's sometimes challenging for us as individuals. It's probably challenging for our bosses who see us disappear for days at a time. But I think it's super important that we do it, because I always say, if not us collectively, then who? And if we expect, these great regulations to just come from here in Washington without input from stakeholders, how? And I think the other part that I would think is, our voices in the shipping industry, the companies we represent, our partners and vendors, we have a better chance of teasing out some of the obstacles that exist, and bringing them back to this group than I think can be done without us. And so I think, first, a thanks to all of us for taking the time and making the energy. But I think it really is, I think we had a meeting this morning, and it ended with stay the course. And that was like the last note I wrote in our morning session was stay the course. I think we are making some progress on some issues, and I think we can make more progress if we keep grinding at this. But it is going to be a grind. That's it.
So I believe the first item, if you are, all right, so the first item on the agenda today is an update from the Data and Visibility Subcommittee.
Echoing Mike and Ken's comments, thank you all for all your efforts and the time that you guys put into this. It makes it worthwhile to see that it's not an army of one trying to get this information across. And I think we all feel a little bit of that frustration, but staying the course is probably what it will eventually get us to shore. So looking forward to that someday in the future. Thank you also to the FMC and all the members here for putting this meeting together, and Morgan for organizing. Thank you. So just a quick update on the data subcommittee. If you want to click the slide there. We have our 3 recommendations, which we put out in December. Those are part of the MTDI movement. We've spoken to Commissioner Bensel, John Young, his counsel, and continuing to refine our data points and information to try to get as much of that into the MTDI program. Believe that most of everything that we've requested in our data recommendations is incorporated in there, but continuing those those conversations to ensure that that's the case. So as we're in kind of that holding pattern, what we've been doing in the meantime in our meetings is to engage stakeholders in the community and the industry. We've reached out to numerous different organizations, had various meetings with them, presentations at conferences, individual meetings, and online presentations and whatnot. Namely, the National Custom Brokers and Forwarders Association, the Association of Food Industries, National Retail Federation, the AgTC, Port of Long Beach, their Supply Chain Information Highway, Ceramic Tile Distributors Association, Chemical Shipper Association, and there's several more that we'll be engaging with during this time. The idea being that as this goes through its regulatory process, which we are all coming to realize is not going to happen next week, try to engage the community and the industry to see how we can move this along commercially, try to pilot some programs to see where we can get the information and the data that we're looking for to be made public, to be done in a commercial manner rather than a regulatory manner. So Port of Long Beach, their Supply Chain Information Highway, this is something that we recently met with them and felt that it's a nice vehicle to try to pilot and work with to implement as much of the data points as we possibly can. That program's been working for 3 years on this. It's essentially an open data warehouse where you can extract information and data of container level and shipment level information, which is what we placed in our recommendations. Currently 7 or 8 ports working in conjunction with them, and hopefully looking forward to continuing to collaborate with them and see if that's something that we can get done on a commercial level. And again, I mentioned that for us, we kind of feel that it might be a vehicle that could be utilized, or a structure that could be utilized to move forward the MTDS, the MTDI program. From there, we've been discussing, or had some discussion yesterday on an additional data recommendation regarding chassis and equipment, gensets and whatnot, and the visibility of that. I'm sure that we'll continue to deliberate that and flush out some of that information and potentially bring up a new recommendation to bring that information to the forefront and visibility. And from there, we do have a current recommendation for today, and I'll turn it over to Fernando to present that.
Thank you, Gabriel. The recommendation that we have today is a recommendation that, it expands on previous submitted recommendations, as well as discussions that we will have as a subcommittee on the improving and expanding on data visibility and trying to increase and reduce the complexity of the data through the network. This recommendation is in order to to require ocean carriers and their subcontracted parties, MTOs, rail carriers, chassis providers, container depots, and others to publish consistent, aligned, and timely data on the following data elements. For export cargo, empty pickup container yard location, empty pickup date, documentation cutoff, physical cutoff, loaded container location and earliest return day, and loaded container in-gate return. On the import, container pickup available date, container last free port demurrage date, container last free equipment detention date, and empty container return yard location options. We believe that all of these data points are necessary in order to manage and plan all container movements, both upstream and downstream of the network, once a port call has been made in the U.S. With that, Gabriel, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Fernando. So the recommendation is to require
Working in the subcommittee and those here, members of the public today, talk about how this recommendation aligns with the 3 existing recommendations that came out of the December meeting in Oakland, just so to provide some clarity on the interrelationship between them as far as data is concerned.
So this recommendation will span on the 3 other recommendations. The 3 other recommendations are based on shipment data, container data, and intermodal data. This recommendation is to expand not just those data points, but also how the network itself is publishing that data and find consistency of those. There's an example on the actual recommendation. If we have a ship or a vessel coming in from an alliance trade, and that vessel has cargo for let's say 3 different carriers in 3 different bill of ladings, we are receiving 3 different information from that same vessel. The idea is, how do we uniform the data when it's only one vessel calling one port at one given time? There should not be 3 sets of information, it should be only one. So that is the expansion that we're looking for to really get the alignment, consistency, and timely information of publication of the information.
And as been discussed in the meetings, we contract with one party, not 3 or 4 different parties within that. And so the contracted party being the carrier, want to make sure that the information we receive from them is aligned amongst the different carriers involved in alliance, but also aligned within their subcontracted parties. And many times we find ourselves where, you know, the finger pointing starts, go to the terminal tells you one information, the carrier tells you another. So it's just ensuring that hopefully and eventually that information will be required and mandatory of one party, and that would be the contracted party that we contract with for the movement of that cargo.
Thanks, Gabe Fernando. Good summary of that. Data has become such a big talking point in our industry. The FMC has their own initiative with Commissioner Bensel. There's private initiatives out there also that are working. How do we align or work simpatico with any and all of the other data initiatives that are out there? Because coming up with multiple standards and whatnot is not in our best interests. But I know that we're a little agnostic to some of those types of recommendations. So could you just put that into alignment for us?
I think it's difficult to require, any private party, and I think this is why these recommendations, they set the standards of the data that we're looking for, and hopefully have those private parties adopt it, or if not private parties, the terminals, which seems to be right now the most feasible place, or the ports to obtain that information. Again, going back to that airline concept, you go into the airport, you've got that screen that shows you what's going on with all the flights that are going in and out of that airport. That seems to be the most feasible place to find the information. Trying to get private parties to align to it is a little bit of the function of what we're trying to do now by reaching out to the different industries and whatnot. Unless there's a mandate to do it by the carriers, we'll continue to see disparate information, but hopefully if these recommendations go through and eventually get adopted into some type of program, some type of system, they'll set that framework so that we can have consistent data coming from any of the ports and terminals that we arrive at.
Thank you.
Thanks for expanding on that, Gabriel. I just wanted to add a little flavor to that. We're definitely agnostic to the format that it comes in, and everyone that is a party to this transaction has the data elements we're requesting. It's a matter of unifying them across the voyage, and it's much more granular than the other platforms that we've seen where, they're really heat-based maps where you're looking for congestion or points of concern, and this is specific to one vessel, one voyage, and all of the BOLs that may travel on that voyage, regardless of the carrier that's conveying them. So I think it's a little different, but it still could be incorporated into the other, I'll call them systems or platforms that are out there now.
Yeah, and to add to that, under Gabriel's leadership on the committee, we have invited different parties to talk about what data and what initiatives do they have. We believe that at this point that a lot of the parties are working on a silo, trying to solve a problem that as shippers, I think collectively we have individually talked to different MTOs and carriers of the lack of information. But with this, we believe that we're putting the leadership of really naming and identifying exactly what data points do we need, and hopefully all the parties will come together to fulfill that need and not just continue to work in different aspects of it. So hopefully with this recommendation, and as some of the members said before, we're not looking just for a regulatory exit or vehicle. Maybe from a commercial side, it could be something that could be done much faster. As Jen just mentioned, this data is already available somewhere, somehow in either MTOs or carrier systems. We just want the uniformity of how they can provide that data to the BCOs.
I just want to add that while we have done this the last several weeks of our roadshow, I'm going to call it, we're not done. So if we haven't talked to everybody, we're open to doing so. So while we have talked to RELA and RF and all those different associations, there's plenty that we haven't touched. So I would just encourage anybody who has not been spoken to, if they're interested in learning more, we're happy to come to those meetings. Just give us a shout and let us know. We'll attend those. So we still plan to have those conversations between now and our next meeting in August.
I think adding to that, 2 points that I want to make sure are very clear. One, this work was both independent of, but sits under Commissioner Benzel's MTDI, MTDS umbrella. So we started this work in January of '22, and as Commissioner Benzel's work has gone forward, there's an alignment. We have continued to say, both in the last public meeting and the meeting where these initial recommendations were made and voted upon, is that this can start behaviorally, right? To the points made by Fernando and Jen and Morgan, this is available information in the system. There is a lack of alignment and/or visibility and/or timeliness, and that has cost. If we think about the greatest concerns from many shippers across the country in the D&D, the inability to understand what's going on in real time is a contributing factor to a key consideration under the agency today and the work of the Fees and Surcharges Subcommittee. And so this is where the alignment is between the two subcommittees in terms of the overall work. We need to understand what's going on and not take minutes, hours, days to align reality. And at the same time, you know, if you're on a code-share flight, to the airline analogy that Gabriel made, you and your person sitting next to you don't leave at different times. The plane leaves when the plane leaves, and no one disputes that. And yet, when we look at alliance relationships or everybody riding on the same service, there can be great data variation, and as it relates to the export side, has a lot of consequential impacts in terms of trying to manage to be able to get into that port terminal or the rail ramp that's feeding that port terminal. And so this is consequential both for delivery to store and door, as well as to U.S. manufacturers and agricultural producers as we try to compete in a global marketplace. I think the last piece to kind of refocus back on is that, again, to Morgan's point, we believe with the representation on the committee and the subcommittee, we have importer and exporters' core data concerns, but yet we are still waiting for more feedback from the shipper community to make sure that we've got consensus. The goal here is to make commercial improvements that don't require enhanced regulation. But in the absence of that, regulatory action may be necessary to codify how this system works better. And as a lead economy in the world, we should have a better functioning system from a data perspective than we've lived through in the last, and the weaknesses have been identified in the last 20 months prior to this year.
Move to a vote?
All right. Is there a motion to move this to a vote? And is there a second?
Second?
All right, so the motion has been seconded. This item will move forward to a vote. I want to quickly note that this item has been available on the NSAC's webpage, and folks can sort of check out the webpage for this. And for the people virtually, both the this item and the PowerPoints are on the webpage again. So with that, I will go in alphabetical order for the committee. Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Crutchfield?
Aye.
Mr. DeBauer?
Aye.
Mr. Healy?
Aye.
Mr. Hughes?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. Jacobson?
Aye.
Mr. Logano?
Aye.
Ms. Levitt?
Aye.
Ms. Minsky?
Aye.
Ms. Morrissey?
Aye.
Mr. Kudry,
Aye.
Mr. Roche,
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Aye.
Mr. O'Brien, and Mr. Simoneas.
Aye.
The ayes have it. This item has been adopted by the committee.
So if I could bring that PowerPoint back up, last slide. So as we've attempted to reach out to different industries and whatnot, and we've had these public meetings several times, and information is out there on how to contact, how to provide feedback, how to provide input. We're finding a little bit of a challenge getting that done, and so I'll jump the tech on this. The last slide says feedback, please. We encourage anybody to please, reach out to the FMC. I believe it's nsac@fmc.gov.
Correct.
So the email's out there to provide information. Each one of us has our information out publicly, encouraging the public and anybody else to just provide us as much feedback as possible. We have a very good representation here of what the shipping industry is in the United States, but certainly not all of it. And so I encourage those in the public to please give us as much feedback as possible. Is this the right data information? Is there any missing data information? Is there anything else that we can be doing to ensure that we provide better data visibility for the ocean shipping industry? And with that,
Adding on what Gabriel just commented, I think, and Morgan originally raised, it's extremely important that, as Ken noted, that while we may be leading, we need to ensure that we are speaking on behalf of the U.S. shipper, and we get to a consensus and critical mass. We spent a lot of time on this in the Miami public meeting back at the end of March, and while we've had deeper engagement and some industry organizations are here today, we do want to continue to build consensus and a critical mass on priority. With that, it is much easier to go to our key suppliers and stakeholders and say, this is where we need to move on this. If that's not clear, we may have a harder time, as Ken noted, in terms of trying to move this forward in a productive way, because there'll be doubt about we speak on behalf of the U.S. shipper. At the same time, we are tasked as a federal advisory committee to guide the agency. And in the absence of feedback, we are going to continue to move forward as we've been working. We want to engage with as many shipper organizations as possible, and many of our members are parts of other industry organizations and are willing to engage to really make sure that it's clear and aware and how these things interlay, both whether it's data or fees and charges as we go forward. And so we'll continue our focus, and the appeal has continued since our first public meeting in October of 21, that we want to hear from the shipper community and those that we work with to make sure that we're looking at this holistically and making recommendations that are really addressing the underlying issues that we're facing for the long term.
All right, at this point, I think the committee is going to move to its next item, an update from the Fees and Surcharges Subcommittee.
I think we have a slide deck to put up. Very good. We can go to the next slide. A lot of our,
Hold on. Carl, can the members see that? The virtual ones, can you share it? Sorry, can you give us a second, Rich? Apologies. You're good.
okay. First, thank you to the Federal Maritime Commission for having this great and talented group assembled to do this work, and I feel very privileged to be a part of it. And it's a tremendous team that we work with here, and thanks to Morgan and Walmart for hosting us yesterday, and we got some great work done yesterday in subcommittee. Our Fees and Surcharges Subcommittee has focused a lot on demurrage and detention charges. It's some of the things that we've done in terms of recommendations leading up to now, and I have them listed. But first, I'd like to start with just when we talk about demurrage, we understand the necessity for demurrage. We understand that this helps improve flow, that this incentivizes cargo. So to steal a little bit of a line out of the interpretive rule from Commissioner Dye, the demurrage and detention are valuable charges when applied in ways to incentivize cargo interests to move cargo promptly from ports and marine terminals. It's our position, though, that when there's an abuse of those charges where it does no longer incentivize the movement of the flow, these are the kinds of things that we're trying to tackle and come up with procedures, processes, maybe regulations that end up helping this along, identifying where the unreasonable or unfair practices lay and correct those. So slide. In doing so, we've come up with some recommendations. The NPRM that's currently being processed for demurrage and detention billing by the Commission right now, and we're hopefully awaiting a final rule soon, does get into some of the same parameters that we've made recommendations on. The detention billing, of course, early return dates, which we hope will be incorporated into the final rule. Just a specific point that we've made in the past about amending demurrage and detention invoices that needs clarity out there in terms of charge complaints, for instance. We've put a full recommendation out on customs holds, maybe a little bit different from the interpretive rule, but pragmatically speaking, protects all of the stakeholders involved in a customs hold, not just saying that the importer, because their goods went to customs hold, doesn't have to pay, but understanding that ocean terminals are out the asset of the space on their grounds where the containers park, that the ocean carriers are out the use of their asset of the container. And when we project these holds to be, 90 and 180 days, and the charges become significant, we've looked at potentially removing the punitive aspect of those holds so that the importer doesn't have to pay the punitive side and focus more on what is the true asset cost of those holds and reimburse the ocean carrier and the container owner or leaser for their lack of use of that equipment. So all of these things we hope are going to be incorporated into this NPRM on demurrage and detention billing. We also have had a lot of discussion around the 30-30-30 rule, and we definitely support that and would like to see that come out as well. But the biggest part of our more recent discussions, and this started, really as one of our very first recommendations in the Fees and Surcharges Committee, was jurisdiction, or sometimes we were corrected and told it's operational authority over rail storage charges. And we put out a recommendation to the FMC that they should have this jurisdiction or operational authority. And the response came back to us as written here: any expansion of the FMC's jurisdiction must be legislated by Congress. The Commission has direct jurisdiction over common carriers, marine terminal operators, and ocean transportation intermediaries, and this includes jurisdiction over through transportation. When we first read that, we thought that was a slam dunk for us because that seemed like it went along with what we were asking for. But what that statement omits is that if an entity other than a regulated entity by the FMC does the billing, then that's no longer within the purview or the operational authority of the FMC. So what's blatantly missing here is rail terminals and rail storage charges. So we discussed this at our last public meeting. We've had some, one-on-one dialogue as well, trying to understand where the thinking is coming from, why this isn't incorporated into, the full regulations of the FMC and the operational authority. And we were asked to go to the STB and talk it out with them. So we did. We had a meeting with Mr. Fuchs and two of the advisory committee to the FMC. And it was made very clear to us that the STB does not have any authority over contract carriage transportation. And so the rail and the ocean carriers are in a contractual relationship with each other. It's taken out of common carriage, and therefore the Staggers Act provides that there's no oversight by the STB. In addition to that, there's some U.S. code as well that talks about intermodal rail exemptions, and for those two reasons, we were given that the STB does clearly not have jurisdiction. We, look at FMC as the other possible regulatory authority on rail, and the FMC just claims that they have jurisdiction on through bills to inland, as I just read, over common carriers, but they don't over the unregulated entities of the rail. And we're not contemplating that the FMC should have a jurisdiction over the railroad per se, but when there are charges on a through bill of lading that go out to and are done by a marine terminal or a trucker under a carrier haulage situation, or on a through bill that goes to an inland point, whether it be carrier haulage or merchant haulage, there is a contract that the importer has bought and paid for that is a through bill to that inland point, or the exporter has bought and paid for on the outbound side. But there's no regulatory authority if the billing party is different. And so this is the gray area that we're looking at contemplating and proposing a change on. In recent weeks, since we had our last meeting, the NCBFAA, Knit League, and National Retail Federation, some of whom are in the room with us today, were spearheading a multi-association letter to Congress. This went to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in total. That letter, which has been provided to the Commission by courtesy copy, asks Congress to have FMC change the invoice structure for rail storage directly back to the ocean carrier that contracted for it. We feel by taking this action, having Congress ask the FMC to provide this type of coverage, that because the billing, which is basically taking a line out of the FMC's own thinking on the current D&D process that they're currently involved in, where they are identifying how a properly billed invoice would be between the contractor and the contractee. This uses that same logic to say this would be a more proper methodology for billing rail storage. The FMC might say that it's demurrage that they control and not rail storage, and we'd like to address that as well by having a tweak of the definition of what truly rail storage is. So our proposed comments will do that. They will tweak the definition of demurrage to include all land storage, not just that at a marine terminal, and look to compel the rail operators to invoice ocean carriers directly as the properly contracted carrier. So I'll just stop there for a second, and before I go into the proposal, just take any questions from the group here. We can go back to the one the previous slide. Yeah, yep, that's good right there. So any questions or comments from the group before I proceed with our proposed recommendation?
Again, I think just for people that are not as close to this as we have been, and are following what NSAC has been working on, talk about the 2 points that you raised about, that the railroad should be billing the ocean carrier, and our focus, between the contractor and the contractee. I mean, basically the shipper and the ocean carrier. Let's kind of expand on that a little bit, just so, again, many people are in fees and surcharges who are in the room, and many people that are more familiar with this issue because they're living through it. But just to kind of widen it out for the broader audience, kind of those 2 points and the focus on that.
Sure. So it's evident when we buy from the ocean carrier a through bill of lading to an inland point that we're buying a service from them to go from point A to B. The problem arises when we get to go and pick up the container at point B. The ocean carrier's contractor to do that inland move is the railroad, has, for whatever reason, through their operational issues or whatever the delay may be, has delayed the availability of our container. And we don't have, in that particular scenario, a regulatory authority to appeal those charges to. we are told the charges are so much a day and you have to pay them in advance before you can have release of your container. And frankly, this goes outside of the OSRA data requirements because there's no invoice given. There's usually a website that you pay. It doesn't really specify any of the reasons why or what the actual daily charges are, what day it was first in and out. It's just really, in most cases, it's a lump sum fee that you're asked to pay to release the container. If we want to dispute that, we don't have any kind of an agency to go back and dispute it. The STB has been quite clear that it's not them. The FMC, however, has given us a varying indication of where their authority may stop and start, or start and stop, in that order. In that, we've had public statements where through bills of lading, they do have authority over, but then we've got this qualifier of, if the entity that's billing the actual charges is not a regulated entity, then all bets are off. That's not under something that we can dispute through the FMC. So in their thinking, in this NPRM currently that they're contemplating on demurrage and detention billing, they have brought out the contractual party should be the one that bills their customer for the services provided. And using that logic, we're saying the railroad should then bill the ocean carrier for those services provided. Any other comments or questions before we move on? So next slide, I'd like to just run through these, and you can advance the slides as I get through them.
Rich, hold up, just 1 second. Awesome, you're good to go.
Okay. So our proposal, whereas NSAC previously corresponded with FMC on the topic of rail storage charges, which we consider a form of demurrage, by the NSAC recommendation dated May 6th, 2022. And whereas the FMC responded to NSAC recommendation acknowledging the Commission has direct jurisdiction over common carriers, marine terminal operators, and ocean transportation intermediaries. This includes jurisdiction over through transportation. And whereas the FMC further responded with an example, an ocean carrier that provides a shipper with a through transportation rate from Asia to an inland destination in the United States will be subject to Commission jurisdiction for the entire through transportation. And whereas railroad terminal operators act as agents for and emphasizing on behalf of the ocean carriers who resell their services to provide transportation to an inland destination in the United States on through bills of lading. And whereas through transportation is not completed until the container is made available and or delivered to the motor carrier or store door delivery location. And whereas rail storage charges are sometimes unreasonably assessed to the ocean carrier's customer directly by rail terminal operators prior to delivery of the container and without benefit of a contract nor regulatory authority over such rail charges. And finally, whereas proposed section 541.4, this is of the NPRM we discussed before, defines a properly issued invoice is a demurrage or detention invoice issued by a billing party to the person for whose account the billing party provided ocean transportation or storage. Qualified by these statements, this person must have contracted with the billing party for the carriage or storage of goods and is therefore responsible for the payment of any incurred demurrage or detention charge, and a billing party cannot issue an invoice to any other person. Therefore, we, the National Shipping Advisory Committee, recommend the final rule issued under 541.3 for demurrage and detention expands the definition of demurrage or detention to mean any charges including per diem charges assessed by, and we will add, or on behalf of ocean carriers, marine terminals, or non-vessel operating common carriers related to the use of, and we want to scratch the specifics of marine and just say related to the use of terminal space, example land, or shipping containers, but not including freight charges. The recommended text there changes 541.3 by the insertion of "or on behalf of" and striking the word "marine," effectively expanding the definition of demurrage to include rail storage. Discussion.
In support of the group's recommendation here, just maybe talk briefly about the numbers that we're talking about. The volume in dollars of rail storage that is billed to importers, exporters, to the trade is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And the majority of it, the vast majority of it, are legitimate charges. What we're talking about are those cases where there's a dispute regarding an invoice that has been generated, and that number is in the tens of millions of dollars. So when we're talking about those kinds of numbers, it becomes really critical that there is an established place that importers, exporters can go to try to get reconciliation. And today, there is not. You bring up a dispute today, it's just an incredible amount of finger pointing between the ocean carrier and the railroad. And then, of course, at times, chassis providers get into the middle of it as well. So if we could find a way, and I think our proposal gives a way to make this whole process easier, to be able to reconcile a problem quicker and more efficiently, it'd be a real help to the whole industry.
Thanks, Bob. Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, if you think about it and you talk to the stakeholders, and so I'm a shipper and I have some rail storage and I'm going to go talk to my differing parties who I might ask for help. If I ask the lines, it's rail storage, it's not me. It's true, it's not them. Suppose they're not billing it. If I ask the railroads, they'll say, it's me, but so what? Doesn't matter, can't touch me. If I ask the STB, okay, that would lead me to the STB. I'll ask them, they've clearly told us, it's not us. But if I ask the World Shipping Council, they'll go right back to, it's the STB. So where are we at? I think at some point, it has to be someone. I don't think anyone in this room, I don't think our ocean carrier partners and friends, I think we all have to agree that someone has to be responsible. Otherwise, why isn't the charge for rail storage $1 million? $50 million? Make the cost could be $1 billion. If no one can say the number can be right or wrong, it could be anything or it could be nothing. But I think really emphatically, some party has to take claim to this issue. Hopefully the FMC can find a way through this recommendation. But it's a start. And it ultimately we have to get to someone raising their hand and saying, it's me. The problem can come to me and I'll find a way to adjudicate it. I think this is a great way to start that conversation.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I think then I'd like to call for a motion.
All right, is there a motion for this? All right, so Mr. Hughes' motion, is there a second? And Mr. Rodriguez has the second. So we will go in alphabetical order by committee member for this item. Mr. Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Crutchfield.
Aye.
Mr. DeBauer.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Mr. Hughes.
Aye.
Ms. Jackson.
Aye.
Ms. Jacobson.
Aye.
Mr. Loganell.
Aye.
Ms. Levitt.
Aye.
Ms. Minsky.
Aye.
Ms. Morrissey.
Aye.
Mr. Cudry.
Aye.
Mr. Roche.
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Mr. O'Brien,
Aye.
Mr. Simoneas.
Aye.
The ayes have it. This item has been adopted by the committee.
Thank you. That's all I have from the Fees and Surcharges Committee.
All right, at this point, we would like to open the meeting up to public comment. The public is also always welcome to comment to the NSAC via email at nsac@fmc.gov. I can report that no public comment was received via email in advance of today's meeting. For in-person commenters, please provide your name and affiliation before beginning your comments. So, I believe, no.
I thank the FMC and the chair for allowing the Knit League to comment. My name is Siva Narayanan. I represent the Knit League, and I'm the chair of the Ocean Committee. So firstly, we are commenting on the second proposal that was made today. And I'm pleased to hear, or rather the Knit League through me is pleased to hear that we're making references to the marine terminals and the rail terminals as terminals, which is great. Secondly, I am also pleased that we are hearing words such as pragmatic execution, and which is great because as business and as representing businesses under the Knit League, we want pragmatic and executionable solutions and not just policies that cannot be executed pragmatically. Thirdly, for intermodal storage charges, again, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair Ken O'Brien, for highlighting it's a black hole, and we're going from pillar to post, and finally we get lost in the woods. Thank you, or in the grapevine, or the weeds, whatever, right? So thank you very much for that. And also that as shippers, the document of contract that we have on the fine print written in very light blue at the back of a document called the Ocean Bills of Lading, that is our document of contract. We do not have a document of contract with the rail for intermodal ocean moves, whether import or export. So this is similar to riding a bus. I had this discussion this afternoon, so I'm going to relay it back to you because I practiced it. This is like riding a bus. You bought me a ticket, you, the ocean carrier, bought me a ticket and told me to ride on the bus of your choice. If I have a problem with the bus, I do not have a contract of carriage with the bus, although the bus driver may have a general rule, but I didn't buy the ticket. So I do not have a contract of carriage with the bus. And so where do I go, right? But if I did buy, like the ocean carrier, a ticket with the bus, then it is between the contracted bus company and the guy who bought the ticket to sort the matter out for his constituents or his passengers. It's very simple. It's pragmatic, it's executionable, and I think there is no reason why we cannot go along with the lines of pragmatism and executionable. So the word rail storage, demurrage are semantics, okay? You can remove one or the other, call it. If the MTOs have agreed with demurrage, then let's agree with demurrage for rail storage. Remove the word rail storage. Let's not confuse a grilled cheese sandwich. And again, I come back to saying simplification and being executionable. Why? Most of us who are business people here do have ERP systems in our offices, right? Some call it three-letter words. They're all three-letter words anyway, right? Whatever you have. And our ERP systems do not have multiple whatever pay-to parties. We have to onboard them with W-9s. We have to onboard them with all kinds of information before we can pay somebody. So if you have a bunch of rail terminals operated I have not onboarded them as my contractor. How do you expect me to pay them? Pragmatically, what is there out there today is a not workable solution. And that is the reason why we have truckers paying on our behalf. That's the reason why we have customs house brokers paying on our behalf. And that is why we have confusion where we paid, but when we go the following day, guess what? You haven't paid enough. So we are complicating a grilled cheese sandwich. Okay? So, having said all this, we are in support of your proposition to have the terminals, regardless of MTO or rail terminal, to be, or rather for them to build the ocean carrier who holds the contract with the rail terminals or with the rail, and then for us as shippers, if we are to pay detention and demurrage, or rather demurrage, not detention. Detention's outside the terminal, right, as defined, to pay the ocean carrier direct. Now, a little bit of technicality here is, with the verbiage that was out there today, we agree and we'll also like to recommend that the words "on behalf of" be struck off, which you have done, and also the word "marine terminal" be struck off. We want to strike that. Strike off the word "marine terminal." And so it should read, and I'll submit this to the committee to follow through. It should read somewhere in the middle, like any charges, including per diem charges, assessed by ocean common carriers, marine terminal operators, non-shipping container, marine terminal operators, non-vessel operating common carriers, or railroads performing through transportations under the ocean bills of lading related to the use of terminal space or shipping containers, but not including freight charges, okay? So basically, it's all what I said, but we'll have the verbiage back to the committee to follow, right? So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having us here. And I applaud your work for looking for a pragmatic and executionable solution to this problem. And also that we must think about the ease and simplification of business and not protecting turfs that today seems to be sacred cows, right? So it's all about business, because if we don't export, or neither do we import with simplification, then we're not growing the US economy. That's our aim, to grow the US economy. We're all stakeholders, taxpayers, users, consumers, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. And as mentioned, if you could please send your comment with that language to nsac@fmc.gov, I will make sure that gets to the committee members.
Will do.
Thank you. Buddy Allen on behalf of American Cotton Shippers Association. I just wanted to make a comment and commend all of you for your work. I know that coming from the private sector, you're here on your own dime. You're giving a lot of your time. Many of you businessmen and women are getting a taste of the pace by which the wheels of government turn. And sometimes that's not the pace you're used to in your business. So I commend you for your perseverance and your diligence. The value of the proposals you put forward, we agree with all of them. I want you to know that we are working diligently to make sure policymakers and influencers on Capitol Hill are aware of your recommendations as they contemplate future legislation. I'm making sure they understand the value of your work, the time that's being invested, the consensus that's been reached among this group of stakeholders, and how valuable your recommendations are. So I just encourage you to stay the course, and thank you for your work.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Shapiro. My company is Thunderbolt Global Logistics. We're a one-office freight forwarder customs broker in Baltimore. We're members of the Baltimore Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association and the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association. And I want to echo the remarks about the work you folks are doing. It's, greatly needed. A lot of clarity needs to be made, and with all these extra charges going on, especially on the rail side. I want to just talk about something we're going through right now, and it's part of what Rich's presentation mentioned, which was customs holds. I'll give you just one example, though there's probably, thousands out there. But we have a company that is imported, they have a big solar farm that they want to build in Texas. Solar panels are being imported from Vietnam. There's concern that they may be violating the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. So Customs has put a hold on the containers, which we knew going in that was probably going to happen. And they took one container, brought it to this container exam station, unloaded it, then they left the other two at the port. And the port director in Houston, they have discretion whether we could pull them off the terminal or not. And they said, no, you have to leave them on the terminal. So this shipment arrived in December. We're in May. So we're over 6 figures in demurrage for the two containers per diem for the container that's sitting at the CES. And then on top of that, Houston has a container dwell fee. And that dwell fee is actually going up now because of the weekend closing. So there's, all sorts of economic impact. And this project, we don't know if it's going to get scrapped or what's going to happen because of the amount of money involved versus the value of the cargo. It's crazy. So, Rich and I have talked recently, and I agree. The shipping lines shouldn't get zero for keeping the containers on the shore. The use of the container is important. Same with the terminal operator. I think your recommendation of the 25% cap is reasonable, but for somebody to have to pay over $100,000 because of this lengthy time frame to examine every ounce of the supply chain, which I get. These regulations are very important. We support them completely. But, from an economic standpoint and practicality standpoint, it's crazy that these are sitting at the port when the FMC has said, we want to stop congestion at the port. And we only have 3. I know there's hundreds there over the same issue. So that was just a comment. But I thank you for all the work you've done and you're continuing to do with this group.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy O'Liddy. I'm the Executive Director of NIDLE, working with Rich recently, but I hope we work more together. I'm not sure if you're aware of another situation, but I did see that you had New York and New Jersey up there, where they're opening the terminals on weekends when they decide they want to open them on weekends. And then they decide what hours they're going to open them. And now they're switching their hours during the week so that you can't consistently, the poor truckers cannot handle it. It's unfair. We are working, I'm part of a demurrage and detention coalition, and we are working to do a big letter on that issue. And it's definitely blatant attacks on us for talking about free time with FMC. And they've made that kind of clear. So I don't know what we can do with your coalition. And I have to tell you guys, I applaud too. It's hard enough to get your job done, but if you're giving time like this, it's much appreciated. I just think this is a blatant attack on shippers.
Thank you. All right, at this point, I will bring it back to the chair and vice chair for any closing remarks for today.
Thank you, Mike. So from my side in closing, I think, it's easy in my own mind to say, as the impacts of COVID and supply chain congestion wane, is this necessary? Is there more work to be done? I think when you look at the regulatory landscape, bills being proposed in Congress, shippers need to be more active now than ever, because now the attention of the nation's upon supply chain. For the first 28 years of my career, no one knew what I did in my family. Now everyone thinks I absolutely know what's going on. They were wrong both times, it turns out. But I think because there's this increase in attention and this desire to help, I think truly people are trying to help, members of Congress, regulatory agencies. I think it's really important that the voice of the shipper, what really happens at the terminal level, what we do day to day in our businesses, that we provide that feedback, because it's a really complex industry. And so I think actually there's probably a redoubling of effort ultimately that has to occur to stay on the leading and forward edge of, as these ideas and policies start to become, ultimately it's much easier to address these things by being vocal ahead of time than to try and amend policy, and that really requires the stakeholders to talk. And I think, I've never seen a solution that doesn't come when people don't communicate. And so while we are here representing shippers, I don't view it that way personally. I view it, we're representing industry, including our carrier partners. We don't always agree. We don't agree in this room ourselves, and that's just absolutely okay in my mind. But we need to keep the dialogue going, and that will ultimately bubble up areas where we absolutely totally agree and can kind of move forward with policies. But I think this communication piece is really important, and the comments from Siva and Nancy, I think they resonate with me completely. It shows that there's still continuing issues that are follow-on issues from things that we thought we solved, which have created the newest problem. And let's face it, there'll be something out there that we don't know about, the black swan event, the unknown unknown, that we're going to have to react to as we go forward. And so I think I'll end with stay the course.
I think I'm going to begin and end with reasonableness, right? At the end of the day, and we think about the standards the agency is using to look at the rules that are in place and new rules and rulemaking that's under consideration, it goes back to what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. I think as Siva and Nancy noted, the cargo entities bear these responsibilities. The importer and the problems in Houston is consequential to the viability of their firm and whether something that seemed like a good initiative will move forward or not. And so we are focused on, as shippers in the system, the things that are not working and have been most impacted by the 2020, 21, and 22. But to Ken's point, the way forward, and if we're really looking at industry-based progress, is going to be the engagement that we have with those parties that are essential to getting the physical movement of goods done. I appreciate both the affirmation of stay the course from the people that have been here today from the public, as well as the recognition that the work that the committee members are doing at the subcommittee level is resonating, is on track. Because if you think about the technicality of the recommendation made by fees and surcharges, it is precisely aligned within the existing language under review by the agency, right? We're not coming at it from a broad place with, to Siva's point, no pragmatic focus. It is technically precise, and I've been so proud to be part of a group that's really that well focused on this, because we can all talk about the issues at the end of the day. We can all talk about our points of pain, and we can all commiserate on what isn't working in the system, but ultimately we are responsible for the way forward. And we appreciate those who have provided feedback to us in today's meeting. We are still waiting for that virtual feedback to come in. But like I said at the beginning of this meeting, in the absence of feedback, this group is going to move forward as we believe is in the best interest of progress in particular areas in agency scope. And so we highly encourage and are willing to engage beyond these meetings with industry organizations to continue to ensure that we are working and incorporating your concerns and priorities in the work that we're doing. And as Ken noted, recognizing that it is not a monologue. It's a dialogue about and problem solving for the future with those that we work with. The game here, the end game here is an improved operation within the system. It's not to shift disproportionate burdens between parties. There are clearly legacy issues that we're dealing with, whether it's jurisdictional gap or some other areas that are creating long-standing issues that the shippers in the United States are facing. And so the way forward is the continuing focus of this committee with the agency within their jurisdiction and working more broadly with the U.S. shipper community and those essential members of our supply chain to figure out what can pragmatically be done and what is reasonable to figure out how to address some of these issues that we're facing.
All right. So the committee has discussed all items on its agenda and has concluded those discussions. At this point, I will adjourn this meeting of the National Shipper Advisory Committee. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance and participation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for that. Yeah, virtual. Yep.
See you next time.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if y'all did not use your pads, just please leave them where they are. We'll take them back. Yes, we will.